I'm an attorney and I've been practicing for 19 years. My education is I went to Boston College and I received a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology and philosophy, and my plan had always been to go to law school. I worked for a couple of years after going to law school, and before going to law school, I'm sorry, and I applied to Suffolk University School of Law. I went at night for 4 years, and during the day I actually worked for an insurance company, which in their environmental law unit. So I gained a lot of experience while I was in law school. And then when I got out of law school, I worked for a civil litigation firm on Beacon Street in Boston until I got married and had my children. And once my children were born, I decided to go out on my own, and I've had my own law practice for the last 10 years. So the types of law that I practice are civil litigation, which includes personal injury cases, slip and fall cases. I also work on divorce, probate and family work, and I do immigration, and I also practice criminal law. So from a civil cases, about 90% of the cases resolve before trial or from some form of alternative dispute resolution. Actually, you're required in Massachusetts that if you have a trial date for a case, the court requires you to actually go into a mediation situation to try to resolve cases. The courts are so backlogged right now that they really want you to use other forms of alternative dispute resolution. From a criminal standpoint, a lot more cases go to trial because your client can't afford to use a plea bargain, which is another common form of resolution in a criminal matter, because they can't afford to have certain things on their record. So from a criminal standpoint, more cases go to trial. From a civil standpoint, more cases tend to settle. So when you're preparing a case for trial and it doesn't look like it's actually going to resolve, trials could take 2 weeks, they could take a day, they could take 4 or 5 days. It all depends. But for example, a civil trial, both parties go in to a trial situation. Oftentimes on the morning of, the defense in a civil trial will make an offer to try to resolve it so that it doesn't go forward. When that doesn't happen, you pick your jury. That's the first thing you do. And then at the end of that day, you see how your jury is going to look. And depends on what kind of a jury you end up with, it may make one party or the other feel less confident about their case. And then, if that doesn't settle after that, the next day you're doing your opening arguments and the plaintiff puts on their case. And then after the plaintiff rests their case, that's the next logical point where a trial could end, because the defense doesn't want, they've seen how the jury has reacted to your evidence and to your experts and to your client if your client takes the stand. And then it could resolve then. The next step is that the defense puts on their case. They put up whatever evidence they can to dispute your case. And then you do closing arguments. And after closing arguments, the judge steps in and the judge will instruct the jury. And the jury instructions are basically negotiated between the plaintiff and the defense. The judge issues the jury instructions to the jury. Then the jury goes out. That's another logical point where a case will resolve before a jury comes back. So if it's a large civil case, I've had trials go well over a week. And the reason why they do go that long is because trials only go from 9 to 2 in the afternoon, because it's a lot for a jury to sit there for that long, and it gives both parties a chance to prepare for the next day. So you have a little time to prepare for your next day of trial. So jury selection is crazy. Everyone's afraid of what they're going to end up with as a jury. In Massachusetts, you get 3 strikes to knock out any juror for any reason. But the problem is, you knock out one, and you don't know what you're getting on the next one. So the next one that fills in. Every lawyer it's the biggest problem in going to trial, and that's why so many cases settle. For instance, if you're handling a drug case, you really don't want anyone on your jury who is related to a cop, married to a cop. You don't want people who, let's say it's a drug case, you don't want mid-level insurance people on your jury. You don't want people who follow the rules. You want people who are more flexible and understanding, younger people who are more accepting of the culture. If you have an OUI case, and let's say your client's a 40-year-old woman who got arrested on the way home from her book group one night, you want other 40-year-old women on your jury, but there's no predicting who your jury pool is going to be. And it's just, right now juries are really tough, because if you're going in front of a jury with a big civil case, and let's say you're asking the jury to award your client a lot of money for personal injuries they received. Well, we're in a tough economy right now. There's a lot of people out of work. There's a lot of people that are unhappy about their financial situation. And so you select a jury and you have people that have been on unemployment for a long time. Chances are they're in financial difficulty, and they're not going to feel that they should award your client a windfall or a lot of money for their injuries. So there's so many factors that go into play, and that's probably the single biggest reason that cases resolve before trial, because no one knows what they're going to get. And with the three strike rule, you really don't have an opportunity to question jurors too much, and you really don't know what's going on behind the scenes with them. So that's the biggest problem with jury selection process. So the skill sets that I feel are part of being a successful attorney are the ability to know know each particular issue and be prepared. So, for example, what I mean by that is, if I have a client and I am going in front of a judge and asking the judge for something, I am going to research the law. I'm going to know exactly the facts of my case cold, because there's nothing that judges hate more than an unprepared attorney. That is the number one thing, is being prepared. For example, I have a mediation on a very, very large case coming up in 2 weeks. The case has been going on since 2008. It's about a 10-inch thick case file. And before this mediation, I've scheduled an entire day this week to go through every medical record, every motion, every document, every interrogatory, so that when I go to the mediation, I know this case cold, and I can converse on it without having to stumble. The second most important thing is selling yourself and your client. If you're prepared and you can communicate really well, you're going to 99% of the time come out on top. But other lawyers, a different skill set is important. Let's say you're a tax lawyer. You are not necessarily have to be such a salesperson, such a performer, but you have to know the tax code cold. So I think that when people decide if they want to be an attorney, they have to look at their own particular skills and then decide what field they want to go into. The best thing about being an attorney for me is obviously when I'm able to bring to a conclusion a very large, complicated matter and resolve it. Everybody likes to win. So you get fired up, okay? So you go to court and you're arguing something in front of a judge, and the judge grants your motion. You get psyched. It's the best feeling. Settling a big case, it's great. I mean, it's the best thing out there. For me, in particular, because I practice on my own and I have my own business, one of the most important parts of being a lawyer and doing what I do is the flexibility that I have. I have 3 kids, and I'm here, I'm a part of their lives, and I like to be there for them. So I have the opportunity and the flexibility to work at night or work more when I'm not with them. I get up early in the morning a lot and do work so that I can be with them. So for me, the flexibility The only things that are not flexible in my life are my court times and my trials. And other than that, I have the best of both worlds. The worst thing about being a lawyer, especially in my particular situation, is that I'm always responsible for everything that happens. So if you work in a big firm, you get to, there's tons of associates. So if you go on vacation, for example, there's always someone else to handle your work. For me, I take my work with me on vacation. I can never get away from it. But that is such a small, minor inconvenience for the pluses that I have in my job. The worst thing about being a lawyer for me is resolving a matter or doing something for a client and getting a successful outcome, and then you have to turn to your client and get your client on board as well. So it's almost a double battle sometimes, and it can be very difficult because I understand all the legal implications, I understand all the good and the bad with their case, and so when I'm working, say, with an insurance company or with a defense firm, I'm resolving an issue, and then I have to go to my client and almost do the whole thing over again to convince my client that it's the right thing for them. And I'd say that would be the worst thing for me. So the biggest problems with the criminal justice system that I feel, in my personal experience, first of all, I feel that judges should be elected and not appointed. So they can't play favorites, and they can't, they're impartial, and then they lose their job if they don't do a good job. Another thing that I have a real issue with is the truth in sentencing in drug cases. If you are, let's say you're accused of manslaughter and you get 10 years in prison. If you go to a state prison, you get time served for good behavior. You get a day, and for each day that you serve, you get a day and a half off your sentence. So you're basically out in less than half the time, probably more, probably like a third of the time. However, because of the truth in sentencing in drug cases, if let's say you're arrested for possession of cocaine and you get 10 years in prison, you serve 10 years in prison. And it just doesn't seem, there seems to be an inequity that I understand that the reasons why the laws were put into place to cut down on the drug trafficking, but it doesn't seem fair that people who are accused of violent crimes end up out on the street in a fraction of the time than people who are accused of drug crimes. That's just one small issue. I also think that another big, huge problem is there aren't enough court-appointed attorneys, and that because there's such a need for court-appointed attorneys, I think that all criminal attorneys should be required to do a certain amount of pro bono work so that everybody gets a fair trial. And the reason why our justice system is the best in the world, it's flawed, but it is the best in the world, and everybody is entitled to the best defense possible, and I firmly believe that.